Good morning, guys, and welcome to the podcast. I've got a fantastic guest for us today, Steven Zeller. And my question for the audience is what if we could talk to a first generation millionaire entrepreneur who has a passion for technological innovation? And so, Steven is our guest for today. He's going to talk to us about AI, quantum computing, genetic engineering, and the future. He's a futurist himself, and I love talking to people on the cutting edge and really excited about this episode. So, Steven, welcome.
Christopher, thanks for having me. It should be a fascinating conversation. And yeah, it's a great time to have it because there's a lot of things that are rapidly advancing. So let's get into it.
Briefly, you've got a really, and I love people that have made it and they're doing other things and venturing into podcasting and thought leadership. So, talk about your journey and we'll dive into the questions and conversation.
Sure. Very fun journey. So I won't take too much of your time on it, but the brief history is I grew up in a large family in Midwest in Kansas City, Missouri. Didn't really come from money, so really struggled with trying to figure out what my path was in life. I ended up during my first job as a teenager, I ended up deciding I wanted to go into entrepreneurship, but didn't really know how, didn't have financial resources or backing. I was always fascinated personally in the human body, biology, the human anatomy, the brain was particularly fascinating to me. But I was sitting there going, okay, so I've got a couple different possible routes to take here. One is 14 plus years of schooling to become a neurosurgeon, which your life is pretty much laid out. And by the way, I've got a ton of respect for neurosurgeons and just medical professionals in general. But I felt that I could do more from a entrepreneurial path. I didn't want to necessarily inhibit my ingenuity by going down a specific path that wouldn't allow me to venture into others. So I'm now in a position where I'm lucky enough to marry those passions, entrepreneurship and technology. So technology, especially when you're talking about biotech, genetics, things like that. But what I look for is anything that's going to dramatically improve human civilization and advance us into a prosperous future.
Yeah. And we'll talk about what I love is when we talk about gene therapy, AI, quantum computing, space, robotics, brain computer interfaces, all these are, but we'll start out just what is on everybody's mind is AI. And so, how are you? What are your thoughts on AI? Where is it going? How to leverage AI? Talk about that for the audience.
Yeah, it's already here. So now it's a matter of adopting and figuring out how to conform to the new age, the new world. The transition is already happening. It is no longer a science fiction question of if this will ever happen. It's been hypothesized and fantasized about for decades. We're talking about Arnold Schwarzenegger and the Terminator days back then. You're like, could this happen? But that's a dystopian universe, of course. Now we're at the point where you actually have a rapid, imminent integration into the workforce for AI, agentic AI, right? That's going to be very incredible what the capabilities are, what it's actually going to do from a business perspective. And then you also have at the same time robotics. So now imagine a combination of taking humanoid robots and integrating them with systems like GPT, right? But ChatGPT is not necessarily doesn't have the reasoning capabilities that necessarily a human would have. So it would be good for certain tasks, put them on an assembly line, give them specific tasks, right? And they can pick, pack, place, manipulate. You've got different companies like BMW is running and AWS. Companies like that are already implementing a very forward thinking pilot program by taking humanoid robots and seeing what it's like. Now imagine a world where, and by the way, this is not too far in the future. We're talking about 3 to 5 years. This is actually going to be a common everyday occurrence where you see this integration of humanoid robots and AI, agentic AI in the workforce on a day-to-day basis. That's incredible. So now imagine a world where production doesn't stop. You don't have to worry about necessarily a 9 to 5 or exhausting. You can have a company that pays $20,000 to $30,000 for a humanoid robot that can do basic tasks. They're not going to replace humans from a reasoning perspective. We're still going to need human beings around for the foreseeable future, but the mundane, repetitive tasks like assembly line work and things like that are going to be dramatically increased from a production standpoint, right? They don't sleep. They can work 24/7. You don't have to worry about them getting tired. You don't have to worry about them going home to their families. And they're just going to significantly decrease the cost of goods overall from an economic standpoint as well.
Yeah. And it's fascinating because the ChatGPT just came out a couple 2, 3 years ago, and it's amazing how
Yeah.
much we're already starting to use it. Because you mentioned leveraging AI in business for kind of the routine, mundane, like the scalable systems, like the clerical and scheduling that. And you touched upon you started to hint upon the effect of AI on higher order thinking, such as creativity, managerial, leadership, strategy, vision. So, what do you think? Are we going to be governed by AI? Is it going to, because it's starting to seep into white collar professional jobs, medicine, law? And do you think, what are your thoughts on human versus AI in terms of just the higher order hierarchy?
Sure. So I
Yeah.
think a lot of people might disagree with this. AGI, in my opinion, is already here. So where you go from generative AI to agentic AI, right? And somewhere in the mix, in between there, I believe that we've achieved artificial general intelligence. But when you're talking about general intelligence, I believe that we're reaching a threshold that, and just let me explain what I mean by that. So, the question is, how do you quantify what artificial general intelligence is? Some people say, is it conscious? Is it self aware? For me, it's if I'm having a conversation with an AI, is it like having a conversation with a PhD level or somebody who has the access to a plethora of information? You can actually converse with them. We've surpassed so many benchmarks that to me would justify making the postulating that they are not necessarily self-aware. They're not necessarily conscious at this point, but they surpass a lot of human level intellect, meaning recent variations of released AI or LLMs. When you send them through specific tests, they are coming back with significantly higher scores than a typical human would get. Now, when I say typical human, we're talking about they're about at the undergraduate level of conversation. So when you're talking about super intelligence, so you're specifically asking, okay, are we going to have overlords? Are we going to start seeing them in managerial tasks, in ownership, or on boards? Should a company have a board of agentic AIs, right? I think we're a long way away from that. And the reason I say that is I think we're going to start to see a plateau. Obviously, you ask OpenAI, XAI, and all these other companies, Anthropic, their take on this, they are dramatically going to disagree with that take. However, we're talking about binary code. We're talking about ones and zeros here. I think we're going to reach a limit from a compute capacity to actually ascertain problems, reason problems, and actually think. What you're trying to accomplish is human level intelligence. I think binary code isn't going to get there personally. To achieve super intelligence, which is a artificial intelligence that dramatically exceeds our own biological function, I don't think we're going to get there until we can actually introduce a workable, scalable quantum technology, because I believe our brains are quantum in nature. We're talking about you have binary code, right? Ones and zeros that are trying to do the same work. You have a human brain, which is the most sophisticated piece of technology in existence today, hands down.
Mm.
And it runs off of approximately 20 watts of power. It's incredibly efficient, but 86 billion neurons billions more glial cells, and then trillions of synaptic connections, which in those synaptic connections, you're talking about thousands and thousands, if not millions, of chemical reactions happening every millisecond. That's an incredible amount of processing power. And you're talking about, if you break it down to the nano world, right, you're talking ACTG base pairs, nucleotides, right? So you're trying to get binary code to process data similar to how a human brain functions. I think no matter how much information you feed these LLMs, how good these LLM models get, they're going to be incredible at basic functionality, at basic conversations. Will they ever achieve consciousness? That's TBD, of course. And there's lots of ways to actually test that theory, right? What is consciousness? We're still trying to figure it out ourselves. So it's hard to test what is consciousness in a system when you don't know what it is yourself. So my personal take is, are we going to see overlords? And there's a lot of people that have interesting proposals on, okay, should we test running a government completely on AI? Because you're taking, the things I like about that is you're taking emotion completely off the table. Humans are very emotional creatures. Now, there are pros and cons to that, right? But from a strictly efficient standpoint, one could argue that a artificial intelligence that has reasoning capabilities, you feed it, hey, these are our objectives. This is what we want to, which could be voted on democratically. These are our objectives for the country. This is what we voted on. This is what we want to see. Now create a plan and put action in place. Take the politics off the table. Put right versus left, Democrats versus Republicans off the table completely. What is the most efficient way to achieve these objectives? And it would do a relatively decent job, theoretically. I obviously don't think we're there yet because I don't think we're going to reach artificial super intelligence until we can figure out the quantum computing component.
Yeah. And it's because you mentioned the quantum computing part, and that's just basically going to accelerate everything, because it's basically you're going to be able to do things so much faster. And then what was interesting is when I was talking with you, this technology is moving at a exponential pace, and much faster than what we saw in the early 2000s with internet and social media. So how are governments going to, what is, when government and technology collide, government is very
Yeah.
slow. And what are your thoughts?
Government slow? No. I don't know what governments you're talking about. Well, let's not get into politics and bureaucracy. We'll be here all day, Chris. But my take is you can't overregulate, and it's competitive by nature. So every government, every major government at least, understands the significance for accelerating their own AI programs and being the front runners, right? Because they understand the importance and the potential ramifications of being in last place.
Yeah.
So from a regulatory perspective, I think you're going to see faster movement and less regulation, which, is that a good or a bad thing? That's a whole nother topic. But what's actually going to happen? Let's talk about that. I don't think that anything is going to, from a government or regulatory standpoint, I don't think you're going to see a lot of brakes on this thing, because the governments want the private sectors to develop this faster, because they want to be in the lead. They want to outpace the competition, because God forbid, right, we come in last place and everybody else figures it out before us, right? They figure out super intelligence or quantum computing before we do, and now they render our own, let's say, SSL encryption is now obsolete. It's gone because we have the technology to just blow past it with laser precision and speed.
Yeah, actually, when it reminds me of the space or the arms race, and who can, basically, this AI is really who can dominate, who can capture this technology and really dominate, is like having a strong military or having Silicon Valley. Or a follow-up question I have for you is, they're seeing these implications of AI, but a lot of things like space exploration and brain computer interfaces, neurotechnology highlight what is going on in that space for to whet people's appetite.
Sure. Which one should I tackle first? Because space tech and BCI, brain computer interfaces, are two different worlds there.
Yeah. Since we're on the subject of Elon and the government, so
There we
talk
go.
about space exploration and astronomy.
Ironically, Elon is in the BCI game as well with Neuralink. But that'll be a nice segue. So let's talk space programs and propulsion systems. Obviously, there's significant amount that's happening right now. We're going to have more and more space programs. We're talking about not commercialization right now, which is actually interesting. So it's always been in the hand. Space has always been the frontier for exploration and scientific experimentation, but it's always been backed by the governments, right? They've controlled it. For the first time, we're seeing privatization for space, and you're going to see a acceleration of that. But you're also going to see, I don't think you're going to see a significant amount of private citizens just jumping around on the moon tomorrow. But we are going to, from a government perspective, we're going to have a presence on the moon. We have the Artemis program. Now that keeps getting pushed back further and further, which is really infuriating and frustrating. But you got to do this right. Setting up a base on the moon is no small feat. We only once in human history have we gone past the Van Allen radiation belts, and just if you're going to have a ongoing presence on the moon that has that amount of exposure to radiation, there's no atmosphere that's going to block those harmful particles. So you're getting blasted and bombarded with particles, with asteroids, and there's nothing to stop it. It's not going to burn up in the atmosphere. It's just going to be penetrating or trying to penetrate your protective gear at all times. So there's a lot of things. If you're going to set up not a temporary, but a permanent base on the moon, you have to do it right. You have to make sure that you're taking the right steps. So I'm okay with them continuing to push it back a little bit. But by 2030, we're going to have a presence on the moon, and it's going to stay there. We're going to have the Artemis program. We're going to have a moon base, a lunar base there. And at the same time, we're going to be running tests, sending Starship to Mars. It's not going to take humans first, but just proving. And the unfortunate thing is, our propulsion systems are still relatively rudimentary. It's only been a couple of years that we've had a reusable rocket technology. Thank you very much, Elon. Hats off to you. I appreciate it. Keep up the good work. That is an incredible feat. But this is the first iteration, right? This is the first time we've had this type of technology that actually can economically get us to outside of our environmental confinement, aka Earth. It's really fascinating stuff. We still have a long way to go with optimized propulsion technology that is capable to really get us there. With current technology, it'll take us about 7 months at its closest. Every 2 years is the closest proximity that we get to Mars, which means we have to wait 2 years. Otherwise, you're chasing it, right? The planet is moving away from us as we're launching, and it's just getting farther and farther as we're going. So to make it feasible with our current propulsion technology, we have to pretty much go there every 2 years. So you're gonna see mass amounts of starships taking people and machines and robotics and everything that we need to actually set up bases on Mars, but it's going to happen in bulk every 2 years. And then they're going to plan for the next round. Now, one thing that could accelerate that is better propulsion. Russia has developed a pretty fascinating, it's made headlines, though I have not seen if anyone yet has actually confirmed this claim, but they have a new propulsion technology that could, they say, get us to Mars in 2 months, 2 to 3 months instead of 7. That would be a significant advancement if the technology is actually feasible and scalable. So we're making leaps and bounds, and there's a long way to go. But where we're at currently, you're going to see a lunar base and a ongoing human presence that's multinational, by the way. I love the collaboration. When you're talking about space, everybody's working together. Now, obviously, there's a little bit, China wants to get there first, state their claim, and then the US says, no, we want it as well. But there's also a lot of collaboration. There's less animosity when we're talking about the collective exploration of space because it removes those boundaries, right? the animosity that you're seeing with wars and things that happen here on the ground, when you're talking about exploring space, we all come together as one species to an extent, right? So it's fascinating when you start thinking about, okay, when we actually can bypass all of these squabbles over natural resources or power or land grabs, AI, and actually start thinking as a human species, how do we proliferate and expand our footprint outside of our confined environment, which is
Right.
Earth? You're going to see amazing things happen. We're going to have a presence on the moon. We're going to have a presence on Mars. There's just a lot of technology that needs to optimize and give us the ability to set up in these hostile environments.
Yeah. It's going to be really interesting in whether or not this happens in our lifetime or if we extend longevity, if we live for 200 years, and what's going to happen to, is it only the rich that can live in on the, and then the rest going to die from global warming or wars or whatnot,
Sure.
AI, really interesting implication. So final question is, what's interesting is, so you're obviously very intelligent, very bright, and you could have gone this kind of traditional kind of the super inefficient route, taking a horse versus taking a Tesla, becoming a neurosurgeon versus a entrepreneur. So what advice for the future that people that are listening, they're like, oh, should I become an entrepreneur? It's risky to go into debt and go to college,
Yeah,
grind it out. There's no jobs left. What are your thoughts and some pieces of inspiration, and how can people find you?
sure.
Yeah.
My advice is don't be afraid of change. So, change has happened, innovation and change has occurred in human history throughout history, right? It's the only difference is the speed at which we are changing. So we're going to see rapid change that if you pushed pause today, fast forwarded 10 years, you wouldn't recognize the
Mm,
world. It would blow you away. You would probably die of a heart attack if you weren't expecting it. We're going to see so much dramatic change. But what I tell people, there's a lot of fear being propagated out there. A lot, especially when you watch mainstream media, when you listen to the doomsdayers, things like that, that take a pessimistic approach rather than a optimistic one. So I believe AI is not going to be our doom. It's not going to spell death. Obviously, could I be wrong? If we can achieve some sort of consciousness or super intelligence that decides that we are our own worst enemy, which wouldn't necessarily be wrong, Chris. But the message I want to get out there is don't be afraid of this change. We are about to transition into a exciting new world of abundance. That's
mm,
incredible. A lot of people are concerned about the economical issues, right? The
yeah.
what's going to happen? Are we going to live forever? Is that just going to go for the rich versus the poor? Is it going to increase disparity? Listen, what's going to happen is products are going to get cheaper. If we whether we implement UBI or whatever, we're going to have no shortage of resources. AI is going to fix so many issues. Robotics are going to replace mundane tasks so that human ingenuity is going to finally be allowed to thrive. It's such a waste of a good human brain that has so much capability to be wasted on a mundane task like an assembly line. I think that we are going to see, whether it's by UBI, universal basic income, or whatever the case may be, we're going to enter into a world of abundance where poverty is eradicated, cancer is eradicated, or to at least to an extent, disease is significantly reduced.
Mm,
And while disparity may still exist,
mhm,
so the people who are creating this change and front runners of this change, they're going to reap the benefits of it.
mhm,
But a world where the poverty line is raised, nobody goes hungry. Everybody eats. Everybody has something to do, and then the mundane tasks are being facilitated by the AI, the virtual AI, and the robotics, right? And now humans are free for higher level critical thinking and really, how do we get humanity to the next level? That is the world that we're entering, not the doomsday Terminator style that everybody is afraid of, and it's all over the internet, all over the news. We're going to see incredible things, and as a human species, we're going to do incredible things. Now, from to your point, your question of, okay, I'm sitting here listening to this. How do I capitalize? What do I do? What route do I take? you really need to start thinking about, okay, if I'm going to be entrepreneurship, how do you leverage AI to your benefit? How can I build a business and capitalize on where the world is going? This is inevitable. This is happening. It is not a question of if, it is a matter of when and how. So, how do I capitalize on it? That's what you have to start thinking. And your brain is capable of it. Start thinking about, how do I implement this AI technology to my benefit and create? If you create value for humanity and the world, you're going to reap the benefits. As far as going to college, college is changed. Let's be honest. ChatGPT could be your, if you knew how to prompt it and have conversations, it could teach you more than the vast amount of curriculums out there. Now, there's still going to need to be specialized human jobs, right? So robotics isn't necessarily going to replace brain surgery, though it has the ability in the next 10 to 20 years, right? Start thinking what jobs are going to be rendered obsolete, and those are going to first be the mundane jobs. So if you wanted to get a repetitive job that you know has a high probability of getting replaced by robotics, don't do that job, because then you're going to be in trouble. Start thinking, what's going to be the most value, what's going to be the highest level, the critical thinking, and go for that. And then how do I leverage AI to my advantage in the foreseeable future?
Yeah, really fast, really interesting. On my mind is like, what happens if money becomes obsolete? Because basically, our ancestors were like, they fought over food, basically food
Right.
and shelter, and now we have food abundance. And then what happens if just basically our society progresses where it's where money becomes abundant? It's like people are not struggling to survive. So, really fascinating conversation. How can people find you and connect with you and learn more from you?
Yeah, easiest way is find me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on there. I'm there every day. If you want to just look up Steven Zeller, I'm probably going to be the first person to pop up on the feed because there's not that many of us. And just send me a message, shoot me a friend request. I'm happy to explore anything that you're working on, any questions that you have. Just find me on there, send me a message.
Excellent. Yeah, I really enjoyed this conversation and keep up the great work and really stimulating. And I'm sure the audience really enjoyed it.
I hope so. Christopher, thanks for having me on. It was a blast and hope you have a great rest of your year.
Thank you.